Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. On Tuesday, terrorists attacked an army camp in Nagrota on the outskirts of Jammu, killing 7 soldiers. The attack on the cantonment houses the headquarters of the Indian Army's 16 Corps, the country's largest such corps. Now, the attack came exactly 2 months after the surgical strikes on terrorist launch pads in Pakistan. This was in reaction to the terror attack on a military base in Jammu and Kashmir's Uri, where 19 Indian soldiers died. The surgical strikes were staged with the intention of deterring cross-border militant activity. The year 2016 has already been Jammu and Kashmir's bloodiest in half a decade in terms of terror-related fatalities. There have been 240 deaths due to such violence, according to the South Asia Terrorism Portal, which maintains a database on terror incidents. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll discuss the border situation and the escalating tension between India and Pakistan. Joining me on the program today are Saikat Dutta, consulting editor, Scroll.in, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan, former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, TCA Raghavan, former diplomat who has been the High Commissioner to Pakistan, and also on the program, Bharat Karnad, Research Professor, National Security Studies, Center for Policy Research. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on the program. Lieutenant General, I'd like to start with you, of course. First, the situation on the border is alarming. Is this the new normal? Is this how it's going to continue to be?
Well, I hope not. The situation certainly is alarming on the border. But when we say on the border, I would like to include the terror attacks with it. When we talk of ceasefire violations, we only talk about the line. And maintaining peace there suits Pakistan. That's why their new chief also said yesterday that it will bring in peace there. But we should not fall into that trap. Because that is the area where we are stronger and he is weaker. It was for this reason that in 2003, when the exchange of fire became extensive, Pakistan could not sustain it. They declared a unilateral ceasefire. And we only responded to it. We must create a similar situation. Don't fall into that trap. All right, we'll maintain peace on the line of control and the terror attacks will continue. The two are interlinked. Every terrorist, I take it, is an extension of the Pakistan army. So if we need to curb these terror attacks, we need to curb the Pakistani army. The source from where they start, not at the target end, you can't. It is impossible. People who come are highly motivated. They come determined to kill and prepared to die. There is no effective protection against this. If we have to stop them, then we have to go to the source from where they originate.
Okay. Mr. Karnad, what would you call the situation between India and Pakistan at the moment? Is it fair to say that it is NWNP, no war, no peace?
It is.
No, I'm speaking to Mr. Karnad. Mr. Karnad. Mr. Karnad?
Yeah, yes, it is a no war, no peace, but that's been the case for many years now. You have the instances of the strikes across the LOC by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists and our retaliation in kind. The problem, though, is that while the targets on this side have been Indian Army units and the casualties are Indian Army Jawans and JCOs and officers. On the other side, our retaliation, by and large, at least in the formal sense, when the government talked about the surgical strike, for instance, was restricted to killing the terrorists on the other side and those, the infrastructure and so on. Though it's true that our retaliation that has been on for years together have been, by our special forces, have been on the Pakistan Army units. So if you say, is this a new normal? Well, this has always been the normal on the LOC. So there's no great change that I see in the situation.
Saikat, but there is change, isn't there? Because this has been the bloodiest year so far in the last 7 or 8 years, I would say, because the highest number of casualties were seen this year. There are 240 people who have died as a result of everything that's happened in Jammu and Kashmir, leaving aside the civilian deaths as a result of the protests there in Jammu and Kashmir.
Well, I'll agree a lot with what Bharat has said, but let's also look at it in terms of numbers. Post November 2003 until 2007, the number of incidents on the border were 0. From 2007 to 2011, the numbers of incidents on the border started creeping up but never went beyond double figures. But suddenly this year, you have a huge spurt of violence on the border. And therefore, in some ways, what we have seen in the last decade, this is indeed a major change. and the violence levels have gone up significantly.
And why has that happened, do you think?
See, one, of course, is that there is a lot of rhetoric on both sides. In Islamabad, there is a rhetoric, and you have to understand that the whole raison d'etre for the Pakistani army's existence is always to ensure that levels in India through their proxies is always maintained high, because in many ways the Pakistani army draws its existential sustenance by painting India as the enemy. In New Delhi also, because of domestic political reasons, unfortunately there has been a higher levels of rhetoric, which has also created so many red lines that maneuvering as a military, as a security service has become a little more difficult.
Ambassador, what are India's and Pakistan's foreign policy objective then? Is it going to stay this way? Do we need to think out of the box? Do we need a new scenario where we can sit down and talk maybe? Because around the world, everyone, the narrative is about terrorism, but India and Pakistan do not want to talk about terrorism.
Well, it's important that we take a broader spectrum view of terrorism as far as Pakistan is concerned. First of all, this situation or these challenges are not in themselves new. We have confronted them before. And it's also important to bring into the equation the internal situation in Pakistan. The present year, bad as it has also been one of transition in the military hierarchy in Pakistan. And in the past too, we have noticed that wherever there's been such a transition, there has been turbulence both on the border, on the LOC, and certainly in terms of adventurous activity in the form of major terrorist attacks. That one can run through the record or the chronology of the past few years, but that certainly has been the experience. So it's important that we correlate all this together, not rely on any one particular instrumentality of dialogue or no dialogue, engagement or no engagement, or retaliatory action to ensure deterrence, but rely on a cocktail of each of these instruments.
Mr. Karnad, Ambassador is talking about a transition. Of course, Pakistan has a new army chief right now. Bajwa has taken over, of course. And the Pakistani media, of course, has been talking about how he wants the situation on the border to ease. He's going to work towards that. Do you actually see that happening? Will he be allowed to do that?
Well, look, I think General Bajwa decides the Pakistan Army's priorities. No one else in Pakistan does. And he has said that the internal security threat from terrorism is the biggest threat to Pakistan. So the natural corollary of that position is that he'll try and tamp down on the cross-border terrorism. The problem, though, is this. While the cross-border incidents by either side on the other side of the LOC has been quite the normal for many years. The reason it's gone up in recent times, in recent months, is because now the Indian government has come out with its it has asserted its prerogatives in terms of a surgical strike and trying to be far more, shall we say, hefty in its response, etc. When you go public this way, it's virtually a goad, in one sense, to the terrorists to try and upset the entire balance, the diplomatic, relations, or whatever potential there is for it, by, say, instigating the kind of strikes on Uri, and then more now with the General Bajwa taking over. Because there are elements within the ISI that would not like to see, and of course there are the terrorist groups, who would not like to see a rapprochement stabilize in the relations. So what you have then is the present situation where you provide the Indian government's very publicly taken position of assertive response, etc., is a goad to them to ensure that the relations remain unsettled.
Okay, indeed. Lieutenant General, would you also say that there has been a spike in these attacks also because it's that time of the year, the winter has come, and we've seen, over the years that during this period there is usually a spike because this is the last real entry point for the terrorists to infiltrate into India. Is that all going to ease over the next 2 months when the snow starts falling heavily?
Frank, yes, that is one of the factors that needs to be considered. Summer months are easier to infiltrate. Every year infiltration is heightened during summer months. But why 2016 has been bloodiest is maybe because of the turmoil within the valley itself. You see, when Saikat says that from 2003 to 2007 it was all quiet, the militancy within the valley has seen its ups and downs. Whenever it's down and appears to be slackening, the Pakistani army always does something to incite it. I think Burhan Wani was only a pretext. If that had not happened, they had decided to increase the tempo of the insurgency or the militancy, they would have done it either way. Second point I want to make is that change of regime in Pakistan. We need to consider two things differently. Pakistan Army on one side and Pakistan Army Chief on one side. The Pakistan Army actually runs the country. For a size of Pakistan and for the population of Pakistan, it's a huge army they are running. To justify that, they have to create a bogey of a threat and tell their people, look, if we are not there strong enough, we will be gobbled. And India is a very handy pretext. Pakistan Army has vested interest. They are a commercial organization. They are running things like sugar mills, stud farms, clothing lines. They have 50 commercial ventures. There is no way they will let go of their hold on the Pakistani nerve. So, the present Chief General Bajwa is the 14th Army Chief. No chief in the past has made any material difference to the Pakistani Army's line of thinking. It is not likely to change in a major way. I mean, even in the past, chiefs who have been handpicked by the Prime Minister, 3 times at least, within a short period they turned against the civil government and overthrew them. Ayub did it in 58. Ziaul Haq did it in 77. In fact, within 2 years, not only overthrew Bhutto, who had brought him up from way down in the list, but he had him hanged. Nawaz Sharif picked up Musharraf in 98, 99 he overthrew that. So, to say that the chief will make a material difference in changing the army's line of thinking. In fact, I will go to the extent of saying that yesterday's attack on Nagrota could have been a signal to their own chief by the Pakistani army. Look, don't meddle too much into what we are doing. And I don't think, therefore, General Bajwa or anybody else will make any material difference and change the Pakistan Army's signature tune, which is anti-India.
Okay, let's not talk about the army chief now. Ambassador, let's talk about Sartaj Aziz, the poster boy, really, the civilian poster boy as far as the Pakistani army is concerned. He has made overtures towards India. He said, let us talk peace, let us talk terror, let us talk Kashmir as well. He will be here on the weekend for this conference, of course, on the 3rd and 4th of this month, of next month, I beg your pardon. So, are we going to talk? Are you going to see some kind of talks with Sartaj Aziz? Should India talk to Sartaj Aziz?
Well, are we going to talk or not? You have to ask the government.
Should we talk?
In my view, diplomacy consists of not just the next move, but the next 4 or 5 moves. And as I said earlier, you can't rely on a single instrument. When you have a neighbor like Pakistan, you can't rely on one single instrument to take care of all your requirements. You have to rely on a range of instruments, and diplomacy certainly is one of those instruments. At the very least, the fact that the foreign minister or the de facto foreign minister of Pakistan is coming here, one should not give him a talking point that, look, I made all the effort of going all the way there and nobody engaged with me seriously. What happens after that, we have to see. But the fact is, terrorism in Pakistan is a structural issue. It's a challenge which we will have to confront for many years, as we have done in the past. And therefore, we have to be open to all kinds of possibilities and options. We cannot say that, this is the option I've chosen and this is what I'm going to stick to, because the situation keeps changing also.
Let's take the discussion forward and talk about internal security. And I'll come back to your piece that you wrote, Saikat Dutta. It's alarming, isn't it? Some of those reports that have come out as far as what happened in Uri and the lapses, and even in Nagrota, there are several reports that suggest that the army had specific intelligence inputs that something like this would happen. In spite of that, it happened.
See, as far as my information goes, the central intelligence agencies had passed on a fairly specific amount of inputs to the corps commander there. And the corps commander is actually a very experienced general. He's commanded a counterinsurgency force in the valley. He's also been the CO of an infantry battalion which was in the valley. So he's a fairly experienced man. But what's also happening is there seems to be now an emerging gap between the senior military hierarchy and the lower, I would say the lower leadership, the middle leadership, the captains and the colonels, etc. And it's also a structural issue. What's also happening is the army is, I guess, in some ways a bit confused, because what my sources are telling me is they're not being as aggressive as they used to be, because most commanding officers of battalions are very, very scared of too many own casualties, because that impinges on their career prospects. What's also happening right now is that the situation is so complicated, with a lot of political rhetoric and a lot of political usage of the military, for everything. Even for ATMs, everybody says, think of the soldier. Now that actually has a negative impact on the military and the men, because they're also human beings and they're in a very difficult situation. In a situation like that, they are not able to look at what is their professional duties to do, and are then bogged down with these extraneous considerations. So as a result, if you look at what's happened in OD, there were several major lapses in terms of security. That should have been a learning point. But again, how do you have a situation where people who, even though they are dressed as policemen, walk up to you and then they cross and they're able to reach the officers' mess? I think that's a very, very serious lapse in the military command structure in letting such a thing happen.
Is there a disconnect, Lieutenant General, between the higher ranking officers and the mid-level rankers, as Saikat is saying? Is there some kind of a disconnect, a discord?
I respect what Saikat says, but I don't think I would agree with him. Army's culture and ethos has been the same all along.
Then how come these attacks continue to happen? Why isn't the army looking at these intelligence inputs constructively?
Let me tell you. Let us take these two, Uri and Nagarota. Uri was decidedly a failure on the part of the army. They are sitting on the border. The entire area is under army's control. They had specific intelligence for Uri. I have authentic information on it, and despite that, they were found lax in whatever they were supposed to do. But Nagarota is different. There is no insurgency in Jammu area.
Yes.
This is the first attack after the surgical strike that has taken place south of Pir Punjab. So it's a peace station. The unit 166, which has come in the prominent, is not even located there. The focus there is on the border. Only the rear elements are there. They are basically a transitory population, people who go on leave, they spend a night and then catch the train. People who come from leave, they spend a night and then go.
But the headquarters is just...
It's a heterogeneous mix. It is not a unit located there. Unit is located far away near the LOC. So the rest of the area, it's like a civil area. There is a road passing in the middle of the cantonment. The authorities did make a bypass. Only the trucks and buses are going there. Civilians are still passing. You can't stop them because they'll go to the court. So it is not the same situation as Uri. I don't know what is the failure. Army always examines the failure. It's not that. But it's a kind of a peace station. As a station, and the real element, their families, children are going to school. Some people who are going under medical treatment, they were there. The regular unit is not located there. It's just the rear of the location. One overall station commander is in charge of the security. There are dozens of units located there. So it is a heterogeneous mix. The two are not identical. Uri, yes, decidedly there is no alibi for the army. It was a failure. And army needs to be taken to task. They have already removed the brigade commander. I am sure he must be under trial somewhere. But Nagarota, we still have to wait.
Lieutenant General, I want to stop you one second before I go to Saikat. No, but these inputs that the army gets, are they taken seriously?
The inputs are first stage level.
Or are they just lost in several of those other inputs that they get?
No. Every input that comes has a categorization of the reliability of the source and reliability of the information. So they are graded and they are treated accordingly. Invariably, the inputs are not specific. If you take a look, somebody dressed in police uniform is like to attack in JNK, well, that's no information. Tomorrow you might say Diwali is coming, be alert in Delhi, and then they say, see, I told you. So these kind of inputs, Uri was more specific. They had said Uri is one of their targets. That is why I am saying Uri is an accepted failure. There is no alibi for there. But Nagarota, we still have to wait for the details.
Point taken. Yes, Saikat, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to make this point that last year, the central intelligence agencies had busted a terror module which was operating in Nagarota, and then they recovered some video footage which was specific of the targets which have been hit today.
Yes.
So if that kind of intelligence is available, and you see, why does a module survey and recce areas? They recce areas specifically because they want to target it. And by the time they had busted that module, and this is as latest as last year, most of the information had already gone back to the handlers in Pakistan, which reiterates the fact that Nagarota was a major target for a long time, A, and B, 16 Corps is a very, very important corps. You have some of the key divisions, 25 Div and 10 Div, have played a very major role, as well as Romeo force, which is the key force for counterinsurgency, and it's a major area of infiltration for terrorists from this sector. So as a result, 16 Corps is a very, very important corps, and till the Southwestern Command came up of the army, it was the largest area of responsibility was with 16 Corps.
Do you want to respond to that, Lieutenant General?
No. I mean, every unit located in J&K is important.
But what about the specific input that he's talking about how a recce had been done of Nagrota and how a video was taken of the important establishments there, and those were the ones that were attacked?
I am not privy to what Saikat is, because he's a journalist, he must have gone into it. But video footage may be available for 10 other stations also.
Okay, fair enough.
Where all do you focus?
Okay.
So to say that intelligence failure was specific and we failed, I don't think is a fair comment as of today.
We'll wait for the reports to come, and then maybe we can have a further discussion on this. But Mr. Karnad, let's talk about another aspect now, something that I wanted to raise as well. You know, there have been 5 bases that have been attacked in the recent past, and if you look at the module really of these terrorists, they've stopped attacking the civilians and they've really started attacking army bases. It's probably also to try and get sympathy really from the people of the valley.
Well, that's what I mentioned at the start, that the pattern now is to hit the soldiers, the Indian Jawans that are, and the soldiery that's being lost to these attacks. But if I may just go back to one little thing, the fact is you invariably have reports after the incident of intelligence being fed whatever, and however you prioritize the intelligence by the station commanders, the formation commanders and so on, you have this aspect that you have some prior notice. Now the question is, why is it that time and again the perimeter security is so weak? Somehow it's permeable. Time and again you have these terrorists just walking in and shooting up people. Now there is something wrong. Uri, of course, illustrated this in ample measure. Now the question is, and this has happened in the past, where these terrorists have just walked in, they're in some uniform or the other. The perimeter security is so lax that just seeing someone in uniform is enough for them to pass. I mean, how is it possible that the army hasn't learned the lesson to at least insist that you have the people who pass through, even if these are civilian traffic, they are, required, to carry some kind of identification, some kind of, papers to suggest that they can pass through. I mean, there seems to be virtually no, security at all at the perimeter level. So when you have, these incidents, that's the first thing that's common, that the perimeter security is breached. If time and again you have the same instances of, security breaches, then, the army has to rethink its SOPs, whatever they are, in terms of stiffening the barriers and the protection that you provide the formations inside the camps. Even if these are, transit camps or whatever it is. If the security is not good, your soldiery is going to be vulnerable. And this is a lesson that seems not to have been learned by the Indian Army.
Okay, lessons.
And this to me is very troubling.
Okay, lessons have not been learnt, and these lessons need to be learnt in the future.
This is a fact.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I've got about 3 minutes left on the program, so I want to, look at the way forward, and let's see what is the solution really to this problem. Ambassador, what is the solution? Do you see a solution in sight? Is there a solution in sight?
I don't think there's a solution in sight which is easily attainable. There's no one single bullet, silver bullet, which is going to solve problems in a month from now or a year from now. I think we face a major terrorist challenge, and we have to see it in terms of the context of what is happening in Pakistan also. This change in behavior you referred to about army commands and army units being attacked is something which was noticed in Pakistan 8-9 years ago, when their internal terrorists shifted the attack pattern, not wholly but substantially, against army units rather than only against softer civilian targets. So I think there is a larger morphology which has to be addressed, and in that context I don't think there is a solution which one can say that if I do X, Y and Z, we won't have any terrorist attacks.
I want to hear from the military man, the ex-military man. Should we talk or no? Lieutenant General, should India and Pakistan talk, or should we say no talks till terrorism stops?
As of today, my answer is no.
Okay.
Because you will be seen to be talking under pressure. My mind thinks on the military lines. The immediate response is at the military level. Heat up the entire 740 kilometers of LOC and continue firing. Blast up their post. They've already done it today, 1 or 2 posts. Continue doing it till they come on their knees and ask for talks. Then talk. I'm not against talks. In the long run, two neighbors have to talk. Why military bases are being targeted? It's not that they're softer towards civilian, but this gives them higher value. You have attacked a protected area. So obviously, it gives them more value. We can even attack the army's bases. I don't think they are friends of the civilians in any way.
Okay, fair enough. Saikat, for every 2 terrorists that are killed this year, there has been 1 military personnel who has lost his life. Looking at that, would you say that this module has not worked? It's time for a creative rethink in what we do.
Oh, absolutely. Because you see, I had a little hope when the surgical strikes were carried out, but what subsequently is coming out, I'm a little doubtful now about the efficacy of the surgical strikes. But of course, there are a lot of creative ways. I mean, for example, look at the use of our special forces. I think we grossly and inadequate in the use of our special forces, and a lot more can be done as an instrument of power, which the military can do and which the government can do, and it must exercise it. Intelligence could do a lot of things which we have written about. But of course, I'm also a great votary of the fact that ultimately both countries have to speak. But you also have to keep in mind that how do you speak to a country which uses terrorism as a statecraft of its national foreign policy?
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Karnad, I've got 30 seconds left on the program, so I'm going to let you have your final say.
Well, look, I think the new norm is going to be that both sides are going to indulge in covert operations. But that should not preclude talking. That's what Sartaj Aziz, who's coming to Amritsar, will try and attempt to open a channel of communication. I think we should begin talking.
Okay.
Even as we keep up with the covert and overt strikes across the LOC. I mean, if that is the modus operandi adopted by the Pakistanis, we should be prepared to respond in kind, rather than attaching the incidents of terrorism to the holding of talks. Let's just carry on and let's just see, because that's what the Pakistanis think, that India lacks stamina, and then that's what they can exploit in the long run. I think they need to be disabused of that notion, and we can carry on in the manner that the Pakistanis prefer until the Pakistani stamina runs out.
Okay, fair enough. We're completely out of time on the program, so I'll have to call it a wrap there. Conflicting views as far as what needs to be done with Pakistan. We hope that the administration puts its right foot forward. That's all the time we have on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much for watching.